One of my favorite parts of the NFL offseason, which we are really deep into at this point, is predicting things, predicting how teams are going to do, predicting how players are going to perform. But when we project teams, we tend to project based off of what we already know about their roster and their coaching staff. Inevitably, though, there's going to be a group of guys every single year who take a huge step forward and really lift the ceiling of their team that we weren't necessarily expecting. But that's what I'm here to try to do today. I'm going to try to predict those guys who I think are poised to take that leap forward and really lift their teams because of it. And that's why I have a list of 5 guys that I have tabbed as breakout candidates for the 2025-26 season, and let's get into them now. We're going to start off the list with a corner, which I admit is pretty risky because if there is any position in the league that is nearly impossible to project growth and regression, it's this one. But Titans corner Jarvis Brownley Jr. showed me some things last year that I'm really excited about going into this year. This one will be pretty short and simple. Despite the large sum of money that the Titans spent on L'Jarius Sneed last offseason, it was Brownley who I kept coming back to every single time I watched the film of this defense. He's a guy who's just going to get up in the face of whatever receiver he's tasked with guarding, and he has no qualms about using his hands to redirect guys early in the route. Like here, where he just shoves Jalen Waddle into the turf. He's also excellent at preventing separation, and while his stats when targeted won't knock your socks off or anything, he got beat at the catch point a few times, which really doesn't help those numbers out. But getting beat at the catch point isn't really a thing that sticks year to year, so I don't expect this to be a huge concern as he goes throughout his career. Really, when you watch him, you just see an effective press man corner, which on its own is pretty hard to do in the NFL, but it's especially hard when you are a 5th round rookie on a bad team the way that Brownley was last year. Another reason that I'm high on Brownley is because of the defense that he finds himself in. I'm a pretty big fan of defensive coordinator Denard Wilson, and one of the reasons is just how good the secondary looked last year despite all the young guys they were forced to play. Young guys like Jarvis Brownley looked confident in their decisions out there, which to me is a sign of a well-run operation. Take a play like this, for example. The Titans are running some type of match zone defense here, and Brownley immediately recognizes that Keon Coleman is going to be running a crosser, so he cuts bait. But instead of picking up Kincaid, who's crossing from the other side, he notices the safety coming down to take that crosser away. And with a moment of hesitation, which is normal for a rookie defensive back, he quickly realizes that the deep crosser is coming into the zone that he is responsible for, and he books it back there to take this one away. This is not an easy decision to make for a rookie defensive back, but a well-coached one like Brownley does on this play. Like I just said, plays like this prove to me that this operation is buttoned up and run well by Denard Wilson, and that makes me think that Brownley's going to be set up for success going into this upcoming season. Everything I've heard out of training camp too makes it sound like they're empowering him to be a leader in that secondary, and that's something I really like to hear. I just hope that they let him play like a number 1 man-to-man corner and follow guys around because I think he is really good at it. Tight ends usually take a few years to break out, so Brenton Strange is right in the window where it's time to do so, but that's not the main reason I had him on here. The main reason I have him on here is because of how I think he's going to be used in Liam Cohn's offense. But first, I have to show you how Doug Peterson's staff decided to use Strange last season. Strange was predominantly used as a vertical threat in this offense, which most tight ends are, which means he was running sail routes, wheel routes, seams, stuff like that. And that's a shame because I think that Strange is really good with the ball in his hands. It just so happens that they had Evan Ingram, so Evan Ingram took up most of the yards after catch opportunities. But there's good news. Evan Ingram is gone, and Liam Cohn, who is coming in to call the plays, has shown an ability to use tight ends who are good with the ball in their hands. Take Cade Otton last year, for example. Yards after the catch over expectation is a stat that is exactly what it sounds like. It is how many yards after the catch did you get more than your expected number. And among tight ends, Cade Otton finished 5th in the NFL last year with a mark of 90. Brenton Strange had 48, which is still good even if it's not 90, especially considering the lower volume of targets that Strange received. What's interesting is that almost all of these came on short passes, which is great because that's where Cohn likes to target his tight ends. Going back to Otten's 2024 now, the Bucs primarily used him on flats, crossers, and things of that nature. The important thing about these routes is that they got him moving before the catch and created opportunities for him to get yards afterwards, and he had a massively productive year. I also think that Strange is going to get used in a similar way, considering the Jaguars already have vertical threats on their roster in Brian Thomas Jr. and De'Ami Brown. And if that opens up that role for Strange to be more of the short to intermediate area of the field guy, I think he could be in for a pretty big year. Another tight end here that's at a different stage of his development is Green Bay's Tucker Kraft. Now, you might say that Tucker Kraft has already broken out, because many people, including myself, would argue that he's already a top 10 tight end in the league considering his receiving production and his tenacity as a blocker. But that's not why I have him on here. I have him on here because I think this guy is ready to become a superstar. I think he's ready to become a focal point of this offense, and I'll get into that now. As I alluded to earlier, tight ends tend to break out later into their career. Kraft had a really big leap his sophomore season, and I think he's ready to take another leap into his third season. Now, to be clear, growth is not always linear. Sometimes guys grow at different paces, but I think all the stars kind of aligned for Kraft to be able to take that superstar leap into year 3. The Packers did add to the receiving room, but it was just a first-round pick on Matthew Golden and then some later-round picks on guys like Savion Williams, and I don't really think they added a wide receiver 1 unless Golden hits his 99th percentile outcome immediately. So I think the door is open for Kraft to step into that primary pass catcher role, and we already know what he can do as a blocker. There were plenty of examples throughout the season that you could have pointed to of Tucker Kraft being the lead blocker on some type of end around or jet sweep play to Jaden Reed, but he was mostly blocking corners there, and while he dominated those matchups, I didn't think it was really instructive to keep showing him just shoving smaller DBs into the turf. This one was one of my favorites though. There's some window dressing on it, obviously, but this is GY counter, a nice old school run concept. And Elkton Jenkins is in charge of sealing off the defensive end, in this case Montez Sweat, and they're going to run behind Tucker Kraft, who has to take out TJ Edwards in the hole, and that's exactly what he does, and Josh Jacobs gets a nice little gain out of this as he did so often. And in the receiving game, the raw stats were nice, but the underlying metrics are even better for Kraft. He's one of the best yak threats in the league, and I know I already mentioned yak over expectation earlier as it pertained to Cade Otton and Brenton Strange, but Kraft has the second highest mark in the league in that metric at an astounding 159. Only George Kittle could beat that mark, and well, he's George Kittle, but maybe Tucker Kraft is too. He finished 5th in the league in receiving EPA amongst tight ends. He's really good at the catch point, and he is elite after the catch. And for a guy with that skill set, I think about how he should be used, and I think the Packers are already using him correctly. A guy like this should be used on crossers, chip and release routes, and vertical routes, and that's exactly what Matt LaFleur has him doing. The only thing that's really holding Kraft back at this point is the fact that he's not really a nuanced route runner, but that's fine. That's just simply not how he wins. On the contrary, Jordan Love isn't really a scrambler, so he will check the ball down, and that gives Kraft a bunch of opportunities to make plays out of dead plays. And I also trust Matt LaFleur to scheme him up touches and hopefully build the passing game around him this year, because I just want to see what that looks like, because I think that Tucker Kraft could become an elite tight end sooner rather than later. Now we're going back to the defensive side of the ball for a player who I'm quite familiar with, and that is Steelers edge rusher Nick Herbig. Maybe the opportunities won't be there for him behind two great edge rushers in TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, but given TJ Watt's contract situation and the injuries that Highsmith and Watt have both went through over the past couple of years, the snaps could be there for Herbig, and I do expect TJ Watt to get extended here soon, but God only knows with the Steelers at this point. And the reason I've tabbed Herbig as a guy who could see an uptick in sacks and just overall production is because the efficiency numbers that are already there are honestly pretty insane for a young pass rusher like him. So let's just start by talking about the type of player that he is. And he's a little bit smaller in stature, but despite that, he really does fight against the run and is a better player there than many people would expect him to be. But even with that, he is more of a third down rotational designated pass rusher type. And that's fine because boy is he effective as one. Watching Herbig rush the passer is like watching the game on 1.5 speed. I mean, he's just so bursty and quick off the line of scrimmage, and that speed makes this ghost move that he spent the early part of his career crafting really effective. But even if you didn't watch him blow past tackles every Sunday like I did, there's a few stats here that will back me up. 2 of them in specific, and I'll explain them now. One is pressure rate, which you've probably heard before. It's just how often is a guy forcing the quarterback to move off his spot? How often is he hitting him? How often is he getting a sack? That kind of stuff. The other is pass rush win rate. And pass rush win rate is simply how often are you winning your matchup as a pass rusher within a confined amount of time, usually 2.5 seconds. Anyways, Alex Highsmith missed some time last year due to injury, and so Herbig saw an uptick in snaps, and that, along with a second-year progression, he made the most of those snaps, finishing with a respectable 13.7% pressure rate and a fantastic 18.7% pass rush win rate, which was 6th among qualified edge rushers in the entire league. Sure, these metrics are helped by the fact that he had 2 elite edge rushers to play off of along with Cam Hayward in the middle of his defensive line, but still, Herbig is a lot to deal with in his own right, and with more snaps, I think the 5.5 sacks that he recorded last season could really go up as his career progresses. And now we're staying in the Keystone State to finish off this video with the player who inspired me to do this list in the first place, and that is Eagles defensive tackle Moro Ojomo. Ojomo was a player who I had my eye on in the 2023 draft, and I was really surprised to see him fall all the way to the 7th round. Maybe at that time the league was starting to look at guys who could be perceived as undersized and getting pushed around against the run negatively because the shift started to occur towards the run-heavy offenses around then. But a guy who can rush the passer like Ojomo should not fall to the 7th round, and I think so far my opinions on him have been proven right. He wasn't a primary starter last year, considering that Jalen Carter and Milton Williams took the majority of the snaps between 2-eye and 4-eye, which is the area among the defensive line where you'd expect Ojomo to slot in. But, like all good teams, the Eagles rotated their defensive linemen, so he got some snaps, especially on passing downs. And while the sack production wasn't there, he was as disruptive as almost any other interior defensive lineman in the entire NFL on those limited snaps. Last year, Ojomo finished with a pressure rate of 12.7%. That number was good for 11th among interior defensive linemen, sandwiching him right between Cam Hayward and Leonard Williams, and both of those guys had all-pro caliber seasons last year. Also interesting is that his teammate, Milton Williams, finished 3rd in this statistic, and that's the role that Moro Ojomo is stepping right into, the guy playing opposite of Jalen Carter, who is obviously an elite interior defensive lineman who's going to command a ton of attention. But that means that Ojomo is going to get a lot of one-on-ones next year with Milton Williams going off to New England, and more stats will tell you that Ojomo is very good at handling those one-on-ones. And the best way to talk about this is by bringing up a metric that we already talked about, pass rush win rate. And Ojomo finished with a gaudy number last year, 18.7%. That would be top 6 for an edge rusher, like I said before. But if we're just talking about interior defensive linemen, that is good for 2nd in the NFL behind only Chris Jones. So when I say that he's dominating one-on-ones, I mean it. And how exactly does he win these one-on-ones? Well, he's got really good burst off the line of scrimmage, and then he's also got a really nice club move that he uses to get around slower interior offensive linemen. You take that and you combine it with a high motor and probably an uptick in snaps this upcoming year, and I think you're going to see his sack production explode. But even if it doesn't, he's going to impact the quarterback. And I know this because he's already done it 2 years into his career, and he already generates pressure and wins his matchups at a high rate. Now, he does have some work to do in the run game. He does have some work to do when it comes to handling double teams, but the archetype of player that he is a gap shooting 3 technique. And that pairs really, really well with Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, who are already on that defensive line. So you can keep him out there for a high volume of snaps and watch him go be really productive. And I'm really excited to see what he can do this upcoming season. And that's the list. So you might notice some common themes with these guys. For a lot of them, it's just that I like what they've already done in the NFL, combined with the fact that they're going to see more snaps. For others, it has to do with a coordinator or a play caller coming in that I like, or one that's already there. But at any rate, these are guys who I've liked so far in the NFL, or I've seen something that makes me believe in their future, and hopefully these guys can really help their teams elevate this year. Hopefully Tucker Kraft turns into an elite tight end and can really raise the ceiling on what the Packers can be, since they have been looking for a number 1 receiver or a number 1 receiving option. But I'll leave it at that. I'll leave you with my list, which is Jarvis Brownley Jr., Brenton Strange, Tucker Kraft, Nick Herbig, and Moro Ojomo. Until next time.